Hello, everyone, and welcome to this conversation about immersive audiobooks. At Studio Ochenta for some time, you may have seen this already, we have been working on audiobooks. It's a project that we're really enthusiastic about, and especially because we have a unique opportunity to tell stories via audiobooks in a way that we feel hasn't been explored enough and that we're really eager to both try as a company and share with all of you. So before we start talking about this, we'd like to introduce ourselves. My name is Luis Lopez, and I'm lead sound designer at Studio Ochenta, as well as an audio producer here as well.
And my name is Chiara, and I'm a audio producer at Studio Ochenta and assistant sound editor. For those of you who might not know Studio Ochenta, we are an audio production company. We produce podcasts, video podcasts, and starting from 2024, audiobooks. We embarked in this journey, and we're so excited about it. And we are here to share with you a conversation about immersive audiobooks, and we're gonna dive into specific titles that we have, right, Luis?
Exactly. Yes. So to start us off, just as a recap and as a general summary of what we're doing, as you mentioned, we produce audio content in general, podcasts, video podcasts, and audiobooks as of now. And we have several stories that we thought were worth exploring as an audiobook adaptation. When working on them, we wanted to find the right balance between a more immersive sound design guided experience and a more narrative voice guided experience that one would find perhaps in more traditional audiobooks, right? So we found a perfect opportunity to merge both of those formats, if you will, to just go together in content, right? In content that tells stories through full audio experiences, through the use of more deliberate, heavier or at least denser and more well thought out sound design and music, of course, and that reflects and adds on to those stories through the use of perhaps more standard narration. So finding that balance between the more scripted sound design heavy parts with more of a reflection in a more narrative context as well.
Yes, totally. I mean, we are so into experimentation at Studio Centa all the time. No, when we produce our audio content, we always want to make sure to try out some things that we perhaps at some point encountered somewhere, like among all the media, no,
Yes.
that we have nowadays, and we wanted to do this with audiobooks because we realized that it's a very big trend, and it's a different trend among different countries. And we at Studio Centa have this great opportunity of like having the possibility to reach out, no, to different audiences in different countries. And so we kind of like also wanted to play with the multilingualism. That is something that is very dear to Studio Centa and to our audio productions in general, no?
Exactly. And I'm glad that you mentioned multilingualism because, of course, that is one of our pillars at Ochenta, right? Telling stories through as many languages as possible as we can. Of course, it's one of the key things that we look for when producing any sort of audio work. So, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And I'm glad you mentioned everything else that is related to audiobooks in terms of finding the right way to tell a story, both sonically and verbally as well.
Totally, totally. I guess that we should start over, no? We can start our like conversation with I'd say one of the main titles that we have at Studio
Yes.
Centa of our audiobooks, which is mainly one of our like dearest projects, if not the first project that was made at Studio Centa.
Yes, of course. What better place to start than with our Mija audiobook? It is, I mean, if you know the story of Mija, you will, of course, know that it's a story that is very dear to Ochenta as a company, and particularly to Lori Martinez, our CEO and our founder, because it is, of course, a story that, well, that she shares from her own experience, a fictionalized story inspired by her real experiences growing up. And it's such a beautiful story to begin with, right? With these short form stories dedicated to each of her family members. And it's such a great just idea from the start, right? So what I love about the Mija audiobook that we're offering is that it combines that original story and everything we loved about it in terms of the sound and the music and everything else. And it adds on this new and really beautiful reflection on the story itself by Laurie, who is, let's say, revisiting the story a few years after she wrote it and produced it, and lets us know just a lot more about her experience there, right? When Laurie wrote Mija, of course, a lot of those experiences were well, I mean, naturally inspired by her own life and are true in some way, but it is also a fiction story, right? So some things were, of course, slightly adapted to make it work better as a story on its own. So here now we have a chance to hear Laurie's voice, not as Mija, the character, but as Laurie, sort of reflecting on that. And I don't know how certain opinions or just ideas have evolved over time since she wrote it, and just letting us know more about that experience with her family and with Queens, New York, where she grew up, just sort of the general ambiance of her neighborhood, everything she loved, and even not just things that she loved, also things that she now sees perhaps critically and that is worth sharing with her audience, right? So anyway, it's just such a beautiful audiobook. It's just such a beautiful story that blends well with the original version, and that we have a chance to just revisit and update for this version.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting how with the audiobook of Miha we worked with this very particular behind the scenes. No, we know
Yes.
so many behind the scenes, and we are so as audiences so into behind the scenes. No, because we always want to know how something is made, who
Hmm.
made it, and with Mia we have this beautiful experience and the possibility to actually listen to the protagonist, which is also the creator of the show. And I guess that one of the best immersive traits of Miha, the audiobook, is really Laurie's voice, because
Oh yeah,
Laurie
absolutely.
and Miha as a project created an amazing and big community across the world. And so in this sense, like the voice of Laurie speaks to this huge community that really wanted to listen to this voice, and it's also so amazed by getting into this journey thanks to Laurie, I guess. No.
Yes, absolutely. And now that you mentioned Laurie's voice, which of course works beautifully here because we get to hear Laurie's voice. Oh wow, it was 5 years ago when she recorded Mika originally, and of course recording it now, just recently for this audiobook version. It's beautiful to see, well, that it's the same voice and that it has developed over time, not just tonally, of course, but also just in terms of what she has to say and like her ideas and opinions about Mija as a world building device, you know. And of course, that not just happens with Laurie's voice, it also happens with other key elements in the story as well, right? That we are introduced to in the original Mija, which is, of course, the sound design, and very much linked to that, the music itself, right? I think I would say that music is one of the key elements of Mija that makes it work so well, right? Like this cumbia rhythm that always takes us back to Colombia and to Mija's family, that is just so present and really evokes the idea of home, even when you're away from home and all of that. And even, of course, like even this specific sound that if you listen to the original Mija season, you surely recognize, which is el cacumen, right? Which is this little drum beat whenever we talk about this specific idea, right? This concept that is just a thread through the story as well. And just the fact that it has this sound cue to it. I don't know, it makes it just such a fun listen, right? To like expect and be surprised by these little sound cues that are appearing constantly and that are reflected on, of course, in the extra narrations too. Mija is, of course, the first audio production that we worked on at Studio Ochenta, and was in fact pretty much entirely worked on by Lori Martinez, our founder and CEO, and of course the creator and performer behind Mija as well. So she worked on that, and then also it was our first audio production that was also multilingual. It was in English, Spanish, and French. So something that I also enjoy about this production is that the audiobook is also in those same languages, and Laurie actually returns to tell the story in all those three languages, which are, of course, the languages that are in a way like part of her life and her experience, right? I mean, growing up as a Colombian American in Queens, New York, and also moving to France, and well, making France her life as well, right? So obviously those three languages are essentially tied to Mija. Then in further seasons and productions of Mija, we also started exploring in other languages as well, such as Mandarin and Arabic, because of course there was an effort to share stories of mijas from other cultures as well, of daughters of immigrants. So that has always been a fascinating experience to work on. But for this audiobook, we return to the three core languages of this first production by Laurie. So it was great.
Yes, totally. And I also, of course, do believe that these audiobooks really allowed us to further explore the depths of our stories, the
Yes,
origins, the elements that we didn't get the chance to actually explore in the original audio productions that we made.
exactly.
And talking about like other stories and other sides of the stories that we didn't know, we should mention another audiobook that we produced, right, Luis?
Yes. And this is such a fascinating story, and I love it. It's Manual para ser Juan Helsing, which is another, of course, original Ochenta production. And it's such a wonderful story. It's obviously has these elements of folklore and of horror, suspense, stuff of legends, of mystery, right? Of course, it's this story about an anthropologist, Juan Helsing, who basically he isn't really a monster hunter. He's more of a monster researcher, right? And actually, what he does is try to help the monsters out, and he does so by visiting different countries in Latin America and yeah, visiting these monsters and knowing more about their stories and about um, what their problems are, basically, right? And it's such a fascinating story that revolves around social, cultural issues in each of the countries that is explored in each of the episodes, as well as environmental issues. Anyway, it's such a fascinating story, of course, and the sound design is also really amazing. Like it's really complex, and it's just such a beautiful exploration of the sounds of these monsters and the sounds of these environments that the story takes place in, right? So, Kiara, what is something that, or what are some things that you enjoy about Juan Helsing as a story?
I mean, for sure, something that I really appreciated a lot, and I'm talking really from a sound design perspective, and specifically from an immersive sound design perspective,
Yeah,
was the ability to actually like the ability to sound design a monster. It's something that it's incredible because it really gives a sound to a creature that none of us actually knows how they used to sound like, or at least we had, of course, like testimonials and researches, no, and
yes,
coming from legends, but we really were able to explore creatively how these monsters could sound, no. And I guess that
exactly.
this is like the most immersive element that we have in Juan Helsing, specifically from the sound design perspective, no, the ability
Yeah,
to actually also not only to know these creatures, but also like feeling the fear, no, of these creatures,
Yes,
or the maybe also feeling somehow close to these creatures, no, because some of them are
exactly.
so human for so many reasons, no. And I guess that this is something that we really also wanted to explore, no, in the production of the audiobook, no, this type of immersion. And probably Juan Elsing, it's the most immersive audiobooks that we have among our titles.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned the voices themselves because they are really such a fascinating and a key part of this storytelling of this story in general, right? Yeah.
They are, and I do believe that they, of course, like they are, because we have a main character that is actually helping us to get to know these creatures. No, so
Yes.
we have so many different like layers of narration and different layers of sound design and of immersive sound design. So we when we listen to the audiobook of Juan Elsing, we really have the impression of like scratching the surface and going deep down into a very
Yes.
specific story and into a very specific character, and then reemerge. I really have this feeling when listening to this audiobook, which is why I guess it's so unique in its style.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think something that it does so well is that it helps you feel empathy towards the monsters or these like folk legendary figures, right? Like, of course, it has these elements of horror, of uncertainty, of mystery, but the monsters don't just scare us. They share a story that is actually very human, as you said, which I love that you mentioned that word specifically. And continuing with the topic of the monsters and specifically the monsters' voices, it's also beautiful to know that, well, first of all, Manuel para ser Juan Helsing is told in Spanish. So if you are a Spanish speaker or you can understand it, then go ahead. And if you want to practice it, then it's also a great opportunity for you to do so. And well, for a very specific reason, in fact, which is that it blends a lot of accents from different parts of Latin America as well, right? So our protagonists and one of the monsters is from Mexico. We have a Mexican Spanish accent, but then we also have for a lot of these characters who are from different countries, we have native actors performing those roles in those accents. So, for example, La Chupacabras, which is a Puerto Rican monster, is played by a Puerto Rican actress. Same with La Madre Monte, which is from Colombia, or El Lobizón, which is from Argentina. We have those accents present, and not only the accents, but the words themselves and the stories, which are like very much based on the origin, the country of origin of each one of them. So yeah, that's also something I love. And maybe on that topic as well, what I really like is that obviously when you're working with a show about mystery and about something that we don't quite understand, it's part of the allure even is to keep some things unsaid, right? Because it's interesting to know that like no one really quite knows the origin of certain things or the outcome of certain things, and that's part of what helps it with the haunting element sometimes. So speaking about the audiobook extras that we included for this audiobook version, what we do a lot is that we actually research more on these legendary creatures and monsters and all of that, and tell us more about the origin of them and the traditions behind them that we don't get to hear in the episode itself, because of course in the episode we want to hear the monster itself and the interaction and we want more action and it's all there. But now we have a chance to reflect on where did this monster come from and how did it come to be so well known, or in fact sometimes not as well known, but not because of that, like a less important tradition from a country. So it's interesting to have that as well, like this additional research and information about each one of these legends.
Yes, totally. And I also do believe that knowing more about these legends and knowing more about these creatures really allows the listener not only to really immerse into their sounds and their SFX and the ambiances. Not only that, but also you have the possibility to explore social behaviors that actually were born starting from these legends, for example. No, and it's always so important to know more about the legends of our countries, because they really actually makes us understand much better, like the populations that we are now, and the social relationships, no, that we get into. I do believe that
Yes.
in this sense, like we really properly use the sound design as a storytelling device. For us, sound design has always been a storytelling device, and it's something that we really use to also create additional content as such in one of the other audiobooks that we have among our catalog, which is Love, Gods, and Other Intelligent Systems. That is a romantic audiobook, probably the only romantic audiobook that we have. And we're getting into another topic in Love, Gods, and Other Intelligent Systems, which is not only love but also the divine. So in a similar way, to Juan Helsing, in which we are analyzing creatures and legends. So something that we really don't know much about, but that we know because of the popular culture. No, also for in this sense, when we talk about somehow like religious presences, we're talking about something that we really have faith in, but sometimes we know about them because of legends. And for Love, Gods, and Other Intelligent Systems, we decided to create a character, which is the one of a goddess named Amorizia, that has one simple task, which is the one of saving human love from oblivion, which is not
easier
really
said than done.
Yes, exactly. And for this specific audiobook, we started from a story of ours that is Love Items, so which is a rom-com fiction audio story that we have at Studio Ochenta, which.
Chiara, in fact, you of course wrote Love Items, which I absolutely loved. So I'd love to know more about like just your writing process and your inspiration behind this story as well.
Well, I have to say that when I was writing Love Items, it was a very specific moment of my life, I guess, in which in a very similar way to Chloe, I was searching for love. So I guess that in that sense, writing Love Items was a very like personal
journey.
Yes, was also a very personal journey. And writing the character of Chloe, which is an AI researcher, by the way, that basically uses her Alexa, which is called Eloc, to find the love of her life. So basically, Chloe tries in any way to get the help of Eloc in order to find the right one. and when creating the audiobook and coming back to our goddess Amorizia and coming back to the divine, something that I really wanted to do was creating a story within the story, because the story of Chloe and Eloc was so human, and was so of course I didn't aim to necessarily represent all the searches of love of all the people in this world, but I did want to picture the research of love, and I guess that like adding a new character, the one of a goddess, really really brought another layer of sense, which is the one of like the divine, and so the connection between the technology and the divine in the research of love, and in the sentiment of love as a thing. Specifically, when we talk about immersive sound design for Love, Gods, and Other Intelligent Systems, we should really talk about transition sounds. I mean, Luis, we love transition sounds. I mean,
we love them.
Most of the times, like I'd say that we we have clients and people asking for transition sounds, and we have fun
We have
creating
whole
them.
meetings dedicated to like 5 second long transition sounds, and we love them.
Because they're so important. Like transition
Yeah,
sounds do something which is very specific, that might sound so literal by saying it like this, but it's like a transition that you create, no?
yeah,
And in the audiobook Love, Gods and Other Intelligent System, this transition is crucial, because it talks about the divine world and the earth. So we have like
yes,
a transition that puts like in contact the two different worlds, which is like the one of a parallel planet to Earth called Fluxo, and the Earth
yeah,
itself. So we really wanted to create and work on this transition sound to make sure to connect these two worlds, but also to highlight the differences between them, I guess. Um,
exactly.
I do believe that in Love, Gods and Other Intelligent Systems, we really had fun in this way. We really wanted to play with this specific sonic element.
Very much, yes. And well, something that I like very much about Love Items, of course, the original story that inspired this audiobook. We have an actor performing the voices of both Chloe and Elok simultaneously in each of the languages, which are English, Spanish, and Italian. And so something that I really like is just that versatility of being able to listen to one same performer do the human voice of Chloe and the AI robot voice of Elok, and just having that interaction that it always has so much humor to it, and it just works so beautifully as this robot is trying to understand the very human and messy process of love and of heartbreak and all of this that's happening. And it's just such a fascinating exploration of that, right? And something that I really love, and I'd love to know what you think about this, is how with this story and with Love, Gods, and Other Intelligent Systems as a whole, right, you managed to do something that I really like, which is that in the story with Chloe, you have Elok as an AI. And then in the story with Amarithya, you have, of course, a goddess. And with both a robot and a goddess, you get to explore very human feelings and have them sort of comprehend and come to terms with very human realities, even though they themselves are, of course, not human and are sort of in the process of understanding them and trying to make something out of that. So, yeah, what do you think about that, about like exploring humanity through non-human characters?
I mean, I have fun doing that, but said that, like, humanity is the only thing that I know. I know nothing.
Well,
Like
yeah,
I'm not a
I mean,
robot or
same.
a goddess yet. We'll see in the next life. But I do believe that it's really important as human beings, and especially when we talk about love, putting us into other either people or situations or objects, because I think that when we talk about love, it's of course it's a global feeling. It's something that plants do feel. It's something that animals do feel. It's something that even objects do feel, I do believe. No, I do
Yeah,
believe that objects have a soul, and this is much clearer when you're gonna listen to Love Items and Love, Gods and Other Intelligent Systems. So
yeah,
I do believe that by adding human traits to these figures, what I aim to do is basically trying to get to know these other creatures and these other entities that inhabit this world, I guess.
yeah,
Um, and I guess that speaking of like understanding like humans and humanity and human behaviors, I really would like to talk about another audiobook of ours,
yeah.
which is which is actually something that is really distant from Love Gods and Other Intelligent Systems, so Juan Elsing and Miha, that is actually Caper.
Of course.
And Caper is an audio production by Studio Ochenta that basically shares with the listeners the stories behind the most famous heists around the world. And I
Yes.
wanted to introduce Caper when we were talking about humanity and human behaviors, because I think that I don't know, Luis, it's such interesting, the fact that we're so, as human beings, so attracted by heists as a as situations, as something that is happening, no, in our lives. And I don't
Yes.
know, what do you think about that? What do you think we're so attracted to heists?
It's such a fascinating thing because, I mean, of course, uh, there's this huge audience for true crime shows, obviously documentary series, podcasts, all sorts of content related to that. And one of the subgenres of true crime that we particularly enjoy at Ochenta is heists, because they're sort of like, in a way, kind of like a perfect fantasy to some extent, because of course, at least most of the time, people don't get uh overly injured, right? And in fact, a lot of the, or really all of the stories that we focus on in these episodes are heists where no one really was injured. Like the worst thing that happens to someone is that they get taped to a chair, but then someone comes back and gets them. So like it's fine, you know. But of course, the idea of heists is just so appealing, because it's sort of this very almost titillating concept of like, what would you do if you suddenly had all of this money or all of these goods, right? And you know, is there something appealing to that? Like, would you do you kind of like secretly wish you could do that, or at least secretly sort of like fantasize with, like, with seeing if you could do it, if you could pull off a heist, right? Which is, I think, not just the reward itself, like the treasure or the money or the goods, the jewelry or whatever it is, like, or the museum object that you're trying to steal, but also like the planning itself, right? Like to yeah, like the stealth behind it and all of that. I think it's also something that it's just so fascinating to explore, the main characters behind these heists and the journey themselves, the journey in itself to performing the heist finally, you know?
I do believe, I totally agree with everything you're saying, and I also do believe that we have also a very long and rich movie in history that talks about heists in general. So I do believe that we really, as humans, kind of like fictionalized heist stories, because we're so into them, because they create a sort of like feeling of a thrill that we have, like will I be able to make this eventually, would I be able to even do this. And
Yeah.
I do believe that's something that is a very characteristic of like heists, and specifically maybe not about like heists themselves, but about the stories related to heists, are the songs, music. Now, if we think about Mission
Yes.
Impossible, if we think about I don't know, even the Pink Panther, like we have so
Hmm.
many
Oh yeah.
different songs that are related to heists, and that really create, almost like create the lure of the heist itself, no. And that is
Yes.
something that we really worked with a lot with, for example, our audiobook Caper, 10 Elements
Hmm.
for an Awesome Heist, which is like the full title. We
Yes.
really wanted to play with the music as an immersive sound design element, because like thanks
Yeah.
to the music that has a very specific like history, you're able to actually get into that specific story. And also, like, we should reflect for a moment about like the title that we used for this specific
Yeah.
audiobook, no, that is Caper, 10 Elements for an Awesome Heist. Now, dear listeners, we do not want you to prepare a heist or something like that. Like it's
Yes,
not
we are
about
not
that.
endorsing it.
We are not endorsing it for sure, but
Yeah.
we really had fun with this audiobook too, sort of like creating a guide. No,
Yeah.
we're so into we're not only into heists, but we're also into guides in general,
Oh
because
yeah.
like as human beings, we do love guides for so many reasons. And I do believe that this is a very very particular guide, and that is also a
Yeah.
guide that wants to put the light, I'd say, to some factors and some characteristics that sometimes we do not think about when we think about the fact that we really do love heists so much.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, so for example, just to continue with that thing about the guide, we actually have like a literal step-by-step guide, right? And we actually call it the Caper Decalogue. There are 10 full steps that are, for example, like what are the special motivations to do the heist, right? Like is there something that in particular that you're trying to do? Like, do you just want to get rich, or do you want to like get revenge on something, for example, by stealing a particular item that you think shouldn't be somewhere, right? So for example, for that one, there is an original episode of Caper about the heist of the Mona Lisa, right? The theft of the Mona Lisa, and about this Italian man who attempted to steal it from the Louvre, of course, believing that the Mona Lisa should be in Italy, right? So like that's the motivation behind that one. The timely execution and preparation of the plan, the chemistry between the people who were performing the heists, avoiding violence or any sort of like of harm to anyone else, right? Because that's just not part of what should be happening. And then just the escape, of course, which is obviously crucial for this. So yeah, and I think it's such a fascinating exploration of all of the original stories that we had in the original Caper series, right? So, for example, we have another story that I really like, which is the heist of the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, which is these people who want to steal some of the artifacts in there as well, but also have their own motivations to do that, right? They don't necessarily want to keep them. Anyway, it's just such a fascinating story, and I think linking it to a guide also, I don't know, makes it feel like you really can focus on each of these specific steps as you're listening to the story as well.
Totally, totally. I guess it's also like the power of the guides in general. No, the fact that they like guides really allow you to reflect on the different steps that actually like make something. No, and speaking of guides, I guess that maybe we can mention another audiobook. No,
Yes.
that is that also is a guide, but it is also like it's also a very specific guide. I don't know,
Yes.
Luis, if you want to tell us more about this.
Yes. So as we mentioned, we would rather you not attempt a heist with our guide and leave it to the realm of fantasy, of course. But in this
Yes,
case,
please. And
yes.
if you don't want to do this, don't mention us,
Yeah,
please.
exactly. Exactly. Don't tag us. No, but of course, for this next guide, we really do want you to do what it says, right? It is a very practical guide and just something that works very practically and interactively, which is don't spit it out. A wine school dropout's guide to thriving at the wine store. Uh, it's an audiobook narrated by our very own Tanisha Townsend, who is a wine expert. She is from Chicago and she lives in Paris. She's been in Paris for quite some time, and she is a wine educator, wine expert, and her life, of course, revolves around wine conferences, events, tastings, tour guides, and all of that. So she is a great narrator and author here. Of course, in her original in her original podcast, Wine School Dropout, which is a recurring podcast in Ochenta, and also one of the original shows that Ochenta has produced since for a long time. Um, it has been a constant exploration of wine, really as something that shouldn't be left for the rich and fancy, right? We have this idea of wine as being like this very elitist thing, right? Something that you have to be in the right crowd to be able to enjoy.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and almost like, I mean, more than that, I'd say also the understanding of wine. No, like you,
Yeah.
like the fact that the understanding of this specific like beverage is something that it's so elitarian, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have necessarily to be like that. No, like we should also like help people that do not necessarily are experts to actually like know more about the wine, and talk to them in a language
Exactly.
that it's not like the wine language, no, I'd say.
Yes.
And it's also like a very interesting audiobook, this one, because we're bringing a documentary topic, no. We at
Yes.
Studio Centa, we produce mostly fiction original content, but we also do have lots of content that it's a more documentary like, and also so working on an audiobook that has a documentary style was something very interesting for us to do from a sound design perspective, right, Luis?
Yeah, yeah, very much. And then I like this because in contrast to Caper, which we just talked about, which has much more of a like well-defined storytelling aspect to it. Of course, like telling the story of each of these heists. Here it's not that much of a storytelling framework, if you will. It's more kind of like of a how-to or why. Like it's a very explanatory, very educational content, which I think is great because I love what you said about like um, having people understand that like really anyone can partake in wine culture and like everyone's taste is valid and should be developed and understood, right? And I think this is something that this guide does very well because after all it's labeled as what it is, right? A wine school dropouts guide, right? Like we don't really care about like the proper way of doing things because sometimes you'll find out that like there are these guides or how-tos to taste wine that are very much like normative, right? Which are very like how you should do it the right way or something like that or the correct way. And the truth is like those can be helpful guidelines. Like so those things have reasons to be a certain way, but like no one should tell you that what wines you like and dislike like is right or wrong, right? Like you have your own personal taste and it's just worth exploring and developing.
Exactly, and I do believe that the immersive trait of this audiobook specifically, it's that
Yeah.
it really suggests you to drink while listening to it. I mean,
Yes.
we're talking about like immersive sound design for lots of our like different audiobooks, but for this specific audiobook, I guess that like I would define it as an immersive experience as a whole. I mean,
Yes.
it's the possibility of actually like listening to yourself pouring a glass of wine and drink it while actually listening to something. So I'd say that like
Yeah.
the experience is completed only once you get to do these tasks. No, the audiobook almost requires you to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think I love that it deals with pretty fundamental concepts that like I think everyone, it's worth exploring even if you already know like a thing or two about wine, right? Like for example, just some basic wine vocabulary. Like what does it mean that a wine is sweet or dry? What are tannins? What is the purpose really of aging a wine and how should that happen? Why does champagne have bubbles and what are like the different sparkling wines in different countries and why do they have such a like important history of like where they're from? and their origin, denomination, and all of that, even all the way to like how does pop culture affect what we think of as wine for wine and people who drink it, right? Like it also like helps affect this idea of wine as being this very elite thing, which is not necessarily the case, right? So in this audiobook, we also just explore through different conversations with wine experts, with sommeliers, with winery owners, right? With wine salespeople, just the diverse world of wine and seeing how like it's full of so many like rich and different profiles of people who are just, you know, happy to share what they're making with everyone and are not gatekeeping this product at all, right? On the contrary, they want, you know, more people to try it and fall in love with it and explore that taste. So I think listening to this audiobook is really a full experience in the sense of like we're not necessarily going to tell you like, okay, now pour yourself the glass. Okay, now tilt it and now look at the color. Like maybe what other things other guides will do, but it will be a conversation about wine, and it's like I think the perfect um sort of accompaniment to a glass of wine in that sense, right?
And I also do believe that it's a very important audiobook, mainly because it really helps you to understand how to communicate your taste, what you like,
Exactly.
what you dislike, no? Which kind of like leads to, I guess, another big topic, which is basically the one of communication, no? Being able to
Oh
communicate
yeah.
if you like something and if you dislike something, and why it's that, like it's something that it's very important, and it also defines us, I guess, as human beings, no? And I do believe that we have another audiobooks among our catalog that really dives into the topic of communication, no? And not necessarily or like specifically about wine, no, but about lots of different types of communication.
Yes, and that audiobook is Atlas Linguae, which is of course based on the podcast of the same name, which is hosted and written by me. And yes, exactly. It's I mean, obviously, communication is such a broad, enormous topic, and it's really like honestly a challenge to tackle it as a concept or as a topic, right? Because everything we do is communication in some way or another, right? And something that I really enjoy about the Atlas Linguae audiobook is that it really starts with that, right? It starts with how like everything we do is an act of communication somehow, right? Beyond the words that we speak or that we write, like the hand gestures or like the body language that we perform, just simply like even like what we don't say or like our silences are also communicating things all the time, right? But then again, beyond just like the things that we can more clearly think of as communication, like whether it's verbal or nonverbal, right? Just for example, what we wear is communicating things constantly to the people around us. The way we spend and think of our money, our the way we flirt with other people, right? All of these things are just constantly communicating ideas, feelings, emotions to anyone who is around us, and even to ourselves, right? So I think that's
Totally.
something that's so fascinating, and that is definitely something that we highlight and we explore continuously in Atlas Linguae.
Yes, Atlas Linguae, the audiobook, it's so interesting because it really dives into all of these specific like ways of communicating that you just listed, no, that we have as human beings, and also as non-human beings, also as animals. Like we have so many different ways of expressing ourselves, and something that I really wanted to ask you as the creator and the host of Atlas Linguae is um among all of the different like ways of communicating that we talk about, no, and that we have in the audiobook, I was wondering which one was one of your dearest for like several reasons. No, like we know, for example, that immersive audio is something that is a way for us to communicate, and it's also like
Yes.
a way that it's very dear to you, Luis, and to me, Chiara, because like of what we're doing, and because we're sound designers. But I was wondering if there was like a I don't know, something that really fascinates you about the audiobook that you wrote, and about the of course the podcast that you host, that really
Yeah.
you love.
Oh yeah, very much. I mean, when you mentioned the immersive aspect, we of course also have that very present in this audiobook, in a way that's similar to the last two books that we mentioned, both Caper and Don't Spit It Out, the Wine School Dropout Guide. And it's of course like having this very immersive documentary style storytelling, right? Of course, we have the music that sort of accentuates the conversations, the interviews, because in each of the episodes we interview experts on these particular subjects, and we really have like a very balanced insight on all sorts of subjects, right? Of about like the language of money, for example, or the language of flirting, or the language of death, and all of that, which I think is just so fascinating. And as well as like certain episodes that are dedicated to translation specifically, right? For example, one of my particularly favorite ones is the episode on dubbing versus subtitling, which is such a great topic because it's something that I've always been fascinated by, right? Like this idea of watching a film or a series in another language, and like what is the best way to do it and understand the content, right? Is it through dubbing or is it through subtitling? And just as someone who, for example, me personally, I slightly prefer subtitling to dubbing just because I love listening to those original performances, and also if I do understand, at least to some extent, the language of the original production, then I like sort of being able to identify, oh, I know that word, right? Like I understood like that specific word that they said, that sort of thing. But that said, researching and exploring this topic made me really get a sense of like the unique challenges and the real art form that goes to dubbing any sort of production, right? So, for example, we get to listen to this very seasoned Mexican voice actor, Mario Castañeda, who voiced, among other characters, Goku in the Mexican Spanish version of Dragon Ball, right? So it's just such a fascinating thing to be able to hear someone who really puts a lot of time and effort into making a character sound like believable, and someone that you want to listen to, right? And a character that like really has just works as a person, right? And of course, like knowing that voice acting is also acting, and it's also a performance, and that there's so much work and artistry related to all of that, really made me appreciate dubbing more, and also even made me think like, I actually should, listen to more things dubbed, just because like all of that production and all of that work is just equally as important and as precious, you know?
Yes, totally. And it's so like it's so nice that like among all of the different like ways of communication that you of course like studied and shared into both Atlas Lingue, the podcast, and in the audiobook, you chose something that somehow involves sound
Oh yeah.
in any way. No,
Yes.
like we have like both subtitles, like it makes us appreciate, as you said, like the original performance performance of an actor, of a singer,
Yeah,
of whoever, and on the other half, like dubbing, like also makes us appreciate, the interpretation of someone, and of course, like its voice. And I think that
exactly.
this is like a way of saying that you're really a sound designer, Luis,
Oh, very
for
much.
so many reasons. Even when we
Yeah.
talk about like ways of communication, like sound is always there, and I do believe that this is something, this conversation that we just had, like really shows us how much like we care about sound design and about creating immersive experiences with sound design, even when we talk about, of course, like audiobooks that
Yeah.
sometimes like are we do believe that audiobooks like do not like have a heavier sound design rather than, for example,
Hmm.
other media, and it's true somehow, but it's also true that people ultimately do really love to listen to sound stories, and sound stories
Yes.
can also be made of sound, and people do want to listen to those specific stories that are also made of music, of ambiences, or of sound effects, and not necessarily only and isolated voices. No, there's much more that can be added to a story, and the most beautiful thing, I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's the balance and between all of these like
Yes.
elements, and the fact that if we like as musicians, we actually treat these elements as instruments, and we define the projects based on these different instruments, I guess.
Exactly. I love that you mentioned music because it's a perfect analogy to this, right? We used, of course, the term immersive audio, immersive storytelling constantly throughout this conversation. It almost feels like we were throwing it around a lot because it explains so much of what we do. But like, I think that something to just uh, think about is that immersive doesn't necessarily mean like more complex. It could be that, but like it also just means the different ways in which we enter a story, right? Whether it's through like more complex, more layered sound design through music and sound effects and dialogue between different voices, different characters, etc. Or if it's just really a narrative voice, right? But if it's a voice that like through its pacing, through its tone, and of course through the words that are used, can also really submerge us into a story, right? So like immersive storytelling and immersive audio can also come from a very relatively simple sound design, right? But that really conveys that narrative idea that we're attempting to communicate through our stories.
Exactly. I guess that like immersive features of storytelling of audio like are always given by how much like empathic like this specific like media is, no,
Exactly.
and how much empathic a narration is, and there are so many elements that create immersion, and it's just a matter of finding them, and also like understanding how to balance them and put them into a product, I guess. I do believe that we really had a long conversation, and we really highlighted like different ways of creating immersion, no, with audio.
Yes.
And at Studio Ochenta is something that is so dear to us, and so I really would like to give to our listeners some cues where to find us, and subscribe to our channels, subscribe to our newsletters. Of course, like as you were like watching this video, you probably saw a bunch of like links happen, like popping out,
Appearing, yeah.
appearing, lots of links appearing, and those are the links that actually brings you to the first chapters of our like audiobooks that we have like
Yes.
for free on YouTube, and you can listen to them so that you can get an idea of like our work, and how we like to work with sound, no, and not just
Yeah.
hearing like Luis and I speaking.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and of course, like all additional information about where you can purchase these audiobooks will be available in the description of this video. But of course, we also would like to let you know that you can follow us on Instagram at Ochenta Podcasts, on Twitter as well, through that same name. And you can also find all of these audiobooks, as well as more of our content, of course, on our website, ochentastudio.com. You can click on the tab that says Ochenta Audio, and then specifically on the one that says Audiobooks. And there you can find our entire catalog of audiobooks. And you can even find the links to purchase them through different platforms, whichever one you prefer. So if you do
Exactly.
that, we would be incredibly grateful. And we are also very grateful that you made it this far into the video as well. So
Exactly. We're
thank
so
you.
grateful for that. And we also want to remind you that we produce content in different languages, and we have produced
Yes.
audiobooks in different languages. So we have English, we have Spanish, we have Italian. So like
French as
wherever,
well.
like French as well. So like
Yeah.
in like we really try to talk to like the most broad audience that we could do. And
Yeah.
also, we really want to remind you that by purchasing our audiobooks, so you're directly sustaining Studio Cent as an independent production,
Exactly.
which is something that we are very, very proud of, and that we really want to keep on doing. And we just wanted you to be aware of that, and that we're so grateful if you decide to support us in any way.
Yes, that would really help us out. And something that would also help us out, of course, is if you know someone who might enjoy one or more of these audiobooks, please share it with them, with as many people as you can, as you like. We'd love for more people to be able to access our stories through this platform and through this medium.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much
Thank
for being
you.
here with us. Ciao.
Bye.